Hello everyone, welcome to this flipped classroom on fractions, decimals and percentages. We're going to start reminding ourselves of some of the key vocabulary. What does equivalent mean? Well, put simply, it means it's the same value. So it may physically appear different. For example, fractions look different to decimal numbers, which look different to percentages, but their actual value is the same. Okay, so an equivalent number has the same value. So we're going to start just reminding ourselves of how we form equivalent fractions, because this is something we've looked at before, but it never hurts to revisit. So we'll start here with 2/3. Now, our numerator, remember, is the top number. Our denominator is the bottom number. So this literally means 2 divided into 3 equal parts. But we can create an equivalent fraction by multiplying this numerator, the 2, by any number. I've chosen 4. 2 times 4 gives me 8 as my new numerator. And remember, we do the same thing to the bottom. So the 3 times 4 gives us 12. 2/3 is equivalent, it's the same value as 8/12. So if you cut up your pizza into 3 equal pieces and then had 2 of them, you would have exactly the same amount if you'd cut your pizza into 12 equal pieces and eaten 8 of them. It's the same amount of pizza, okay? We can carry this on. This time I've chosen to multiply by 10. So my new numerator, 8 times 10 is 80. And my new denominator, 12 times 10, 120. So 2/3 is equivalent, is the same amount as 80 over 120, okay? So just a recap of what equivalence is all about. Remember, we can multiply or divide by any number, as long as we do the same to top and bottom. Okay, right, here's 100 square. And some of them are shaded. Some of the smaller squares are shaded. In fact, 50 out of the 100 are shaded. So there's our fraction, 50 out of 100. Now we can simplify this to 1/2. Okay, so a half of the square is shaded. Okay, so that's how we would represent this as a fraction. But what about as a percentage? Remember, percentage means out of 100. So here we've got 50 out of 100. So our percentage is 50%. These two, although looking different, are exactly the same thing. 50 out of 100, 50 out of 100. That's what the percentage sign means. What about as a decimal? Okay. So again, 50 hundredths. What would 50 hundredths look like as a decimal? Well, there it is, 50 hundredths. Now, we don't actually need this 0, so we could say 0.5, but I've left it in just so you can see the similarity. 50 hundredths, 50 out of 100 or 50%, 50 hundredths, 0.50. Okay, let's try another one. How many red squares are shaded? So what's my fraction? Well, it's 25 out of 100. Okay, so 25 out of 100 is shaded. This can be simplified. It's also the same as 1/4. But let's concentrate on this 25 out of 100. So what does that mean my percentage is going to be? Well, as percentage literally means out of 100, then 25%. What about as a decimal? Again, going back to my fraction, 25 hundredths. What does that look like as a decimal? There you go, 0.25. Okay, so each of these 3 values, the fraction, the percentage, and the decimal, have the same value. They all represent this red space, the shaded area of the 100 square. Another one. Again, count up the squares. Hopefully you're counting in rows and not counting individually. And you will have realized that there are 75 shaded red. So 75 out of 100 are shaded. This simplifies to 3/4 as a fraction. But again, let's focus on the 75 out of 100, because this will help us create our percentage and our decimal. So as a percentage, 75 out of 100 becomes 75%. And as a decimal, 75 hundredths is 0.75. Okay, is this starting to make sense? Starting to be clearer? Good. Here's our next one. We've got a row of 10 and a row of 8. So we've got 18 of the squares. So 18 out of 100 are shaded. This will simplify down to 9 out of 50. But I'm just going to leave it as 18 out of 100 because for what we're doing, this is more useful. So 18 hundredths becomes 18 out of 100, so 18%. And 18 hundredths is a decimal, 0.18. Okay, so you can see there's 18, or the digits 18, I should say, 18 in all three of these values. What about this one? Not difficult to count, but how is it represented? Well, as a fraction, it's 4 out of 100. That would simplify down to 1/25th. But again, we're going to leave it as this because it's far more useful for what we're doing. 4 out of 100 becomes 4%. And then just be careful because it's 4 hundredths, not tenths. So our 4 is in the hundredths column, 0.04. Okay, right. So here's a few number lines, or bars, I should say, just to help compare some of these values. So the fractions, here's our number bar. It's split into 10 equal pieces. So as fractions, we've got 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, which is our half in the middle, 6, 7, 8, 9/10, and then the whole one. Now that corresponds in decimals. Remember our decimals, the tenths column in decimals is the first one after the decimal point. So the same number bar, we've got 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, all the way through. 0.5 is our half, so it matches the 5/10. 0.6, 7, 8, 9, and then the whole one. Now, how does this correspond to the percentages? Again, the same bar, 0% and 100% this time is our whole one, rather than a whole one, 100% is the whole thing. We've got 10%, 20, 30, 40, 50. 50% is the same as a half, 0.5 is the same as a half, 5/10 is the same as a half. Okay, so we can see how each of these values matches up on our bar. Okay, they're just different ways of saying the same thing. Right, little test for you. Which of these three is equivalent to 1/2? Okay, so we've got a decimal, percentage, and another percentage. Which of them is equivalent to 1/2? Okay, hopefully you've realized that 1/2 is the same as 50 over 100, 50 hundredths, which means that our 50% is the correct answer. What about this one? Which of these is equivalent to 1/10? Okay, so we've got a fraction, a decimal, and a percentage, but which of them is equivalent to 1/10? Well, 1/10 is also equivalent to 10 hundredths. If we multiply top and bottom by 10, we get 10 hundredths. So 10 hundredths, or 10 out of 100, is the same as 10%. So there's our match. 1/5. Okay, so 1/5. Which of these is equivalent to 1/5? We need to create an equivalent fraction that's hundredths. So 5 times 20 gives us 100. 1 times 20 gives us 20. So 20 hundredths. Does that help? 20 hundredths is the same as 20%. So there it is. And the last one, which is equivalent to 0.06. Remember which column this is. Okay. Is this the same as 6/10? Is it the same as 6%? Or is it the same as 60%? Well, this column here, remember we've got our ones, our tenths, and our hundredths. So we've got 6 hundredths. 6 hundredths, or 6 out of 100, is the same as 6%. So there's your match. Okay, well done if you got all of those. Okay, that's the end of today's session. Thank you for listening. We'll see you again soon.